When archaeologist Elena Rossi explores Venice's drowned catacombs, she discovers an echo that answers back. The deeper she digs, the louder it calls, whispering secrets no one alive should hear. Some ruins remember.
The Vaporetto glided silently through the narrow canals of Venice, its engines muffled beneath the grey sky that threatened rain. Elena Rossi stood at the bow, her dark hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp and alert as the city unfolded before her like a dream caught between water and stone. She had arrived just as the Aqua Alta season began, a time when Venice surrendered to the tides, its streets swallowed by the lagoon's rising breath. The city seemed both alive and fragile, a jewel encrusted with history, yet trembling under nature's relentless encroachment. Stepping off the boat onto the flooded quay, Elena felt the cool water lap against her sturdy boots. The scent of salt and damp stone filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee from nearby cafes. Her arrival was not unnoticed. Passers-by glanced sideways, their eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of the outsider. Venice was a city of secrets, and it guarded them fiercely. Her destination was a small pension tucked away from the bustling tourist paths, a place where she could immerse herself in research. As she wound her way through the narrow alleys, the cobblestones hidden beneath the murky water, she sensed an undercurrent of caution in the air. Groups of elderly Venetians clustered near doorways, their faces weathered by salt and sun, watching her with a wary gaze that spoke volumes without words. Inside the pension, Elena unpacked carefully, laying out her tools, notebooks, a digital camera, and an old, leather-bound journal she had inherited from her great-grandfather. The journal hinted at a family connection to the city's aristocracy and whispered of mysteries long submerged beneath the canals. Her mission was clear: to find the submerged archive rumored to hold documents that could rewrite Venetian history. Despite the warmth of the room, an uneasy chill settled in her bones. The Aqua Alta was more than a seasonal inconvenience. It was a metaphor for the city's hidden depths, the secrets that threatened to resurface. Elena's footsteps on the wooden floorboards echoed softly as she mapped out her plan, tracing routes along the waterways that might lead her to the archive's resting place. The next morning, she ventured into the flooded streets, the water swirling around the bases of ancient columns and beneath balcony railings festooned with creeping ivy. The city's beauty was breathtaking. Reflections of ornate windows shimmered on the water's surface, and the distant call of a gondolier's song drifted through the mist. Yet beneath this enchanting facade, Elena felt the weight of unseen eyes, the subtle resistance of a community bound by silence. Her first tentative contact came in the form of a brief exchange with a cafe owner, whose polite but clipped responses revealed little. It was clear that trust would not be given freely. Elena made notes in her journal, recording every detail of the flooded cityscape, every whispered hint from wary locals. Each step forward was measured, cautious, as she balanced her determination against the palpable tension. At dusk, Elena found herself standing on a narrow bridge overlooking a flooded piazza, the water's surface broken by the occasional ripple of a passing boat. The city's lights cast a golden glow, their reflections dancing like ghosts beneath the waves. She felt both a part of Venice and apart from it, an observer drawn into an intricate dance of history and mystery. As night deepened, the silence was broken only by the occasional drip of water from overhanging eaves and the distant tolling of church bells. Elena's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the journey ahead. The archive was out there somewhere, hidden beneath the rising tide, waiting to reveal truths long buried. But the city's protectors, the families, the shadows, the silent watchers would not surrender their secrets without a fight. With resolve hardening in her chest, Elena prepared to delve into the labyrinth of Venice's flooded streets and shadowed past. Every ripple in the water, every cautious glance from a stranger, was a reminder that beneath Venice's enchanting surface lay currents of betrayal and danger. Her quest had begun, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The aqua altar was rising, and with it, the echoes of a history that refused to stay submerged. Elena's first days in Venice were a delicate balance between exploration and caution. Each morning, she rose early to walk the flooded pathways before the city awoke fully, immersing herself in the subtle rhythms of the aqua altar. She studied maps and old records at the pension, cross-referencing with the journal of her great-grandfather, whose cryptic entries hinted at hidden chambers beneath the city. She soon realized that the locals' resistance was not mere superstition, but a protective instinct born of generations. Venice was a mosaic of power and privilege, where family names carried weight and history was a carefully guarded currency. Elena's presence stirred whispers in shadowed cafes and behind curtained windows. One afternoon, she paused at the edge of a flooded canal, watching the water ripple under the soft breeze. The reflections of crumbling palazzi shimmered like fractured mirrors. A faint splash nearby drew her attention. A black gondola slipped silently through the water, its lone occupant cloaked in shadows. The gondolier's eyes met hers briefly, a silent warning or perhaps an invitation. Elena felt the first true pulse of the city's mystery. Determined to find an ally, she returned to the cafe where she had met the owner, hoping for a breakthrough. The proprietor, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a wary smile, offered a few guarded hints about local tales of submerged vaults and forgotten documents. His words were laced with caution. Venice does not like its past dredged up. Even as the sun set behind the domes and spires, casting long shadows over the flooded streets, Elena's resolve deepened. She knew that beneath the water's glassy surface, secrets waited ready to surface, or to drown her in their depths. The city's labyrinth beckoned, and Elena Rossi was prepared to answer its call. The morning fog hung heavy over Venice, blurring the sharp outlines of the city's ancient buildings and softening the relentless lapping of the canal waters against stone foundations. Elena Rossi stepped carefully onto the slick wooden plank that served as a makeshift dock. Before her waited a gondola, bobbing gently with the rhythm of the aqua altar, its familiar shape both reassuring and enigmatic in the dim light. Luca Bellini, the gondolier she had been introduced to only hours before, was already poised at the stern, his wiry frame silhouetted against the mist. His weathered face broke into a cautious smile as he spotted her approach, his hands steady on the long oar despite the chill in the air. "Buongiorno, Signora Rossi," he greeted, his voice low but warm. "The city changes with the water. You'll see things others never notice when the tide rises." Elena nodded, fastening the strap of her satchel securely. Her dark hair was tied back, strands escaping to frame her sharp eyes, which flicked over the canal's shimmering surface. The streets she had navigated the day before now lay submerged beneath several inches of water, turning alleys into rivers and piazzas into lakes. With a practiced push, Luca propelled the gondola forward, the slender vessel slicing silently through the flooded labyrinth. Elena took in the scene with a mixture of awe and unease. The palazzos, their facades worn by centuries of salt and rain, rose like silent sentinels from the water, their reflections distorting with each ripple. The usual bustle of the city was muted, replaced by an eerie stillness punctuated only by the occasional call of a distant gull or the soft splash of the oar. "The aqua altar brings secrets to the surface," Luca murmured, glancing sideways at Elena. "But it also hides dangers." She met his gaze, sensing the weight behind his words. Venice was a city of layers visible and invisible, and she was beginning to understand that the water was both a veil and a revealer. Their morning journey took them through lesser-known canals, winding beneath low arches and past shuttered windows. Luca pointed out landmarks and whispered legends as they went, his knowledge of the city's hidden history proving as invaluable as the map she carried. At one small inlet, nearly swallowed by the rising tide, Luca slowed the gondola. Elena leaned forward, eyes scanning the water's murky depths. Something caught her attention, a faint glimmer beneath the surface, a shape out of place amid the debris. "Here," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I think this is one of the sites mentioned in the documents." Luca nodded, securing the gondola to a submerged post. He handed her a waterproof case and a small net. Elena descended carefully into the chilly water, the sensation sharp against her skin despite her protective clothing. Kneeling beneath the surface, she reached for the object, a fragment of parchment, its edges tattered, ink faded but still discernible. Back on the gondola, Elena spread the manuscript on a dry cloth, tracing the delicate script with reverent fingers. The text hinted at events and names conspicuously absent from official histories, suggesting a betrayal that had been deliberately obscured. "This changes everything," she breathed. Luca's expression darkened. "Be careful, Elena. Not everyone wants these truths to come to light." Their cautious optimism was soon tempered by a chilling encounter. Later that afternoon, while Elena paused at a shadowed cafe overlooking a flooded piazza, a man she had not seen before approached. His eyes flickered with a cold warning as he spoke in veiled terms about the dangers of digging too deep. "Some stones are better left unturned," he said softly, before vanishing into the crowd. The clink of glasses and murmur of conversations masked the threat beneath. But Elena felt it keenly, a reminder that the ripples she stirred could swell into a tide beyond her control. As daylight faded, casting long shadows across the water, Elena and Luca regrouped. On the gondola once more, the city's lights shimmered in the canal's glassy surface, painting a tableau of fragile beauty and looming peril. "We have to keep moving," Luca said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Every discovery brings us closer to the truth and to danger." Elena nodded, steeling herself. The whispers beneath the water called to her, promising revelations and threats in equal measure. The quest had only just begun, and the depths of Venice held more secrets than she had dared imagine. As they glided into the night, the city seemed to hold its breath. The aqua altar wrapping Venice in its watery embrace, a silent witness to the unfolding mystery beneath its surface. The Venice State Library stood solemn and imposing against the grey sky, its ancient stones glistening with the persistent drizzle of the aqua altar season. Elena Rossi stepped carefully across the flooded square, her boots splashing softly in the shallow water that crept up the marble steps. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and aged paper, a heady perfume that stirred a thrill of anticipation deep within her chest. Today, she was not just an archaeologist. She was becoming a custodian of secrets long submerged beneath the murky waters of history. Inside, the library was a sanctuary of silence and shadows. Rows of towering shelves stretched endlessly, filled with tomes bound in cracked leather and yellowed parchment. Giulia Conti, the archivist, awaited her in a small, secluded room at the back of the building. The room was lit by a solitary lamp whose warm glow fought against the encroaching gloom, illuminating a worn wooden table where the fragile manuscripts lay spread out like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Giulia's sharp eyes crinkled in a welcoming smile as Elena entered. "You must be careful with these," she cautioned, her fingers lightly brushing the edges of the brittle pages. "They've been submerged for centuries. The water has preserved them in a way, but also made them incredibly fragile." Elena nodded, her heart pounding with the weight of responsibility. She donned a pair of thin cotton gloves, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the first document. The paper was thin and translucent, the ink faded but still legible in places. As she turned each page with painstaking care, the elegant script of Renaissance scribes unfolded before her eyes, revealing names and dates that did not correspond with the official records. Hours slipped by as Elena and Giulia worked side by side, piecing together fragments of a forgotten past. The manuscripts spoke of secret meetings held in shadowed chambers, alliances forged in silence, and betrayals whispered beneath the glittering masks of Venice's elite. One document in particular caught Elena's breath, a faded letter detailing a pact between powerful families that had shaped the city's destiny through deception and bloodshed. Her analytical mind raced, connecting dots that had been obscured by centuries of deliberate obfuscation. The evidence was undeniable. The accepted narrative of Venetian history was a carefully constructed charade, concealing truths too dangerous to acknowledge. Yet, the exhilaration of discovery was tempered by an unsettling awareness. Elena could feel the weight of unseen eyes bearing down on her, a subtle but persistent presence that set her nerves on edge. She glanced toward the rain-streaked windows, where shadows seemed to dance just beyond the glass. The muffled sound of water lapping against the library's ancient walls was a constant reminder of the city's vulnerable state, the rising floodwaters mirroring the growing peril she now faced. Her research was no longer a quiet academic pursuit. It had become a dangerous game of cat and mouse. As the afternoon waned, Elena heard a soft knock at the door. Her pulse quickened. Julia exchanged a worried glance with her before moving to the door with cautious steps. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Elena's eyes darted to the table, where the most incriminating manuscript lay exposed. Without hesitation, she slid it beneath a pile of innocuous papers, her hand steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The door creaked open to reveal a messenger, his expression unreadable beneath a soaked cloak. He handed Julia a sealed envelope and vanished back into the gloomy streets without a word. Julia broke the seal with trembling fingers, her face paling as she scanned its contents. "It's a warning," she whispered. "They know." Elena swallowed hard, the fragile world she had entered suddenly closing in around her. The manuscripts were not just relics of the past. They were a tinderbox threatening to ignite a fire that powerful forces sought to keep smoldering in the dark. Yet, despite the danger, Elena felt a resolute spark within her. The truth was worth the risk. She looked out once more at the flooded piazza, the water reflecting the dim light like a mirror to the city's hidden soul. Somewhere beneath this tide lay the answers Venice had buried, waiting for someone brave enough to bring them to the surface. Elena knew her journey was only beginning. With a steadying breath, she turned back to the manuscripts, ready to delve deeper into the shadows of history. The fragments of a forgotten past were calling her, and she would not be deterred. The secrets beneath the water were hers to uncover, no matter the cost. As the evening deepened, the library's silence was punctuated only by the rustle of fragile pages and the distant roar of the rising tide. Outside, Venice held its breath, caught between beauty and betrayal, its fate entwined with the courage of one determined woman. And so, beneath the weight of centuries and the ever-encroaching waters, Elena Rossi began to unravel the mysteries that would change everything she thought she knew about the city she had come to love. The past was no longer buried, it was awakening. The heavy wooden doors of the palazzo groaned softly as Elena Rossi pushed them open, stepping into the warm glow of the grand ballroom. The scent of aged wood and polished marble mingled with faint traces of jasmine and expensive perfume. Venetian masks glittered under the flickering candlelight, shadows twisting and turning as the chandeliers above cast their ethereal glow. Conversations floated through the room in hushed tones, punctuated by the occasional clink of crystal glasses and the soft scrape of embroidered gowns on marble floors. Outside, the swelling aqua altar pressed against the stone steps of the palazzo, its relentless rhythm a steady reminder of the city's vulnerability. Elena's dark eyes scanned the room with a practiced caution. She was far from the flooded alleyways and quiet canals where she preferred to work. Here, in this realm of silk and silver, the stakes were different but no less perilous. She adjusted the collar of her damp, practical coat and tightened her grip around the leather satchel that held her notes and precious fragments of the submerged archive. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Signora Rossi," it said, smooth and measured. Elena turned to find herself face to face with Isabella Moretti. The woman was the very picture of Venetian aristocracy, graceful, impeccably dressed in a gown of deep emerald silk that shimmered like the lagoon at twilight. Her dark hair pulled back to reveal a flawless, pale face and eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the veneer of politeness. "Ms. Moretti," Elena replied, inclining her head politely. "Thank you for inviting me." Isabella's smile was thin, elegant, but her eyes betrayed nothing. "Venice has many stories to tell, Signora," she said, gesturing to the throng of masked guests. "And yet some stories are better left in the shadows." Elena felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. She knew all too well that beneath Venice's beauty lurked secrets that could unsettle even the most steadfast hearts. "I believe the truth, however uncomfortable, has a way of surfacing," Elena said quietly, "especially when the water rises." A faint, almost imperceptible flicker crossed Isabella's gaze. "Water is a great equalizer," she agreed, "but it can also drown what we hold dear." As they spoke, the murmur of the gathering seemed to shift, an undercurrent of tension threading through the laughter and polite exchanges. Elena caught the sideways glances cast her way, some curious, others wary. She sensed the presence of watchful eyes, the kind that measured not just her words, but the implications behind them. Across the room, Luca Bellini stood near a window, his weathered face drawn tight with concern. The gondolier's wiry frame was out of place amid the silk and jewels, but his steady gaze met Elena's. A silent warning passed between them. He gestured subtly toward the window, where the piazza outside was slowly succumbing to the rising aqua altar. Elena excused herself from Isabella's side and moved toward Luca, her footsteps light against the polished floor. As she approached, a sudden hush fell over the room, and the distant sound of hurried footsteps echoed faintly from the flooded streets beyond. "The water is coming faster than expected," Luca said in a low voice. "And not just outside. The currents of power and betrayal run deep here, Signora. You must be careful whom you trust." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. The elegance of the evening masked a dangerous game, one where alliances were as fluid and unpredictable as the waters threatening to engulf the city. Their conversation was cut short by a sharp murmur from the crowd. Elena turned to see a group of masked figures gathering near the entrance, their faces hidden but their intentions unmistakably ominous. The air grew thick with anticipation, the floodwaters pressing in like a living thing eager to swallow the secrets hidden beneath Venice's gleaming surface. Isabella reappeared at Elena's side, her expression unreadable. "Venice is not kind to those who pry too deeply," she said softly. "But sometimes the shadows must be faced." The two women exchanged a glance charged with unspoken meaning. In that moment, Elena realized that the path ahead would be fraught with peril, the line between friend and foe blurred by centuries of history and betrayal. Outside, the piazza was a mirror of the city's unrest, the water's surface fractured by the reflections of flickering lanterns and the hurried steps of those seeking dry ground. The rising tide was more than a natural phenomenon. It was a symbol, a harbinger of the revelations and dangers that awaited Elena beneath the surface. As the evening deepened, Elena found herself drawn into the intricate dance of Venetian society, where every smile concealed a motive, and every word was a thread in a tangled web of secrets. The aqua altar was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active participant, its relentless advance weaving through conversations and crossing thresholds. In a quiet corner, Elena pulled out her notebook, jotting down observations, fragments of overheard dialogue, and fleeting impressions. The documents she carried weighed heavily on her mind, fragile pieces of a history that powerful forces sought to bury forever. Isabella's presence lingered in Elena's thoughts, a reminder that in Venice, beauty and danger were inseparable companions. As the night wore on, the tension in the room grew palpable, the social veneer cracking under the pressure of unspoken truths. Luca's warning echoed in her ears: trust no one too easily, for betrayal was as constant as the tides. Elena steeled herself, knowing that the coming days would test not only her intellect but her courage and resolve. The aqua altar had transformed Venice into a city of shimmering reflections and hidden dangers. Elena Rossi moved cautiously through the labyrinthine alleys, the water lapping at her calves, cold and unyielding. The sky hung heavy with a thick, grey veil, muffling the distant sounds of the city, but amplifying the eerie silence that followed her steps. She clutched a small, waterproof satchel close to her chest, inside which lay fragments of the submerged archive, fragile manuscripts that whispered secrets long buried beneath the city's watery veins. Her breathing was steady but shallow, each footfall careful against the uneven stones beneath the floodwaters. The alley narrowed suddenly, the stone walls rising like ancient sentinels cloaked in moss and age. Elena's sharp eyes caught a sudden movement in the water behind her, a ripple, a shadow, and her heart quickened. Instinctively, she quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder. No one was visible, but the sound of footsteps splashing through the shallow water echoed off the walls, growing louder. "Elena!" A hushed voice hissed from the shadows. It was Luca Bellini, his face etched with worry, his gondolier's hat pulled low against the drizzle.
"This way!"
Without hesitation, Elena allowed herself to be pulled into the shelter of a crumbling stone archway, the water swirling around their boots. Luca's eyes darted through the gloom, searching for any sign of pursuit. They were close, he muttered, voice low and tight. "Someone doesn't want you digging any deeper." Elena's mind raced. The subtle threats she had sensed since her arrival had escalated into something tangible, something violent. The conspiracy she was unraveling was no longer just a mystery to be solved, it was a danger to her very life. Who could it be? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of the water. Luca shook his head. "I don't know. But it could be anyone." Venice's secrets are guarded fiercely. They waited in tense silence as footsteps receded into the distance. Elena's thoughts churned. If betrayal lurked so close, then trust was a fragile commodity, slipping further from her grasp with each passing day. Later, in the dim light of a small rented room overlooking a flooded courtyard, Elena spread the recovered documents across a wooden table. The manuscripts, soaked but preserved, bore the faded ink of centuries past, lines that hinted at manipulation, power struggles, and treachery among Venice's elite families. Her fingers trembled as she traced the delicate script, the weight of the revelations pressing down on her. Each word was a shard of truth piercing the facade of Venetian grandeur. The water outside whispered against the window panes like a mournful chorus, reminding her that beneath the city's beauty lay a dark, turbulent undercurrent. Luca entered quietly, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. His presence was a small island of warmth in the cold, damp room. "You should rest," he urged gently. "There's danger ahead, but you can't face it alone." Elena met his gaze, a flicker of gratitude softening her guarded demeanor. "I'm not sure who I can trust anymore," she confessed. "But I know I have to keep going. For Venice and for the truth." Outside, the floodwaters continued their slow rise, swallowing streets and memories alike. In the depths of the aqua altar, secrets stirred, waiting to be uncovered. And Elena Rossi, caught between awe and dread, steeled herself for the battles yet to come. As the night deepened and the city held its breath beneath the swollen skies, Elena's resolve hardened. Betrayal was no longer a distant threat. It was a shadow walking beside her, as real and unforgiving as the water beneath her feet. With one final glance at the ancient manuscripts, she whispered to the silence, "I will find the truth no matter the cost." The damp chill of the Venetian morning clung to Elena's skin as she stepped out from the narrow doorway of the pension. The aqua altar was rising steadily, and Venice's streets had transformed into shimmering canals bordered by ancient stone walls. Her footsteps echoed faintly on the soaked cobblestones as she made her way toward the labyrinthine alleys that concealed the city's secrets. It was not long before she became aware of a presence. A figure lingered in the shadow of a crumbling palazzo, his gaze sharp and calculating. Detective Dario Sartori. Elena had heard whispers of him, a man known for his thoroughness and skepticism, especially when it came to outsiders poking their noses into Venice's affairs. She met his eyes briefly, a silent exchange charged with unspoken questions. Sartre's suspicion was palpable, and yet, beneath it, she sensed a flicker of curiosity. He was watching her, not just as a suspect, but as a puzzle to be understood. Later that day, Elena found herself at a discreet cafe nestled beside a canal, its terrace shaded by drooping wisteria. The murmur of water lapping against wooden pilings blended with the soft clink of porcelain cups. Here, in the shifting twilight, she encountered Isabella Moretti. Isabella's presence was magnetic elegance personified, with her impeccably tailored attire and eyes that seemed to pierce through lies and half-truths alike. Their conversation was a careful dance, words wrapped in layers of meaning, smiles that barely concealed veiled threats, and silences pregnant with implication. "You tread dangerous waters, Signora Rossi," Isabella murmured, her voice smooth as Venetian silk. "Not all truths wish to be uncovered." Elena met the gaze unflinchingly. And yet, some truths must surface, no matter the cost. The social undercurrents were as treacherous as the rising floodwaters outside. Friendships and enmities entwined like the twisting canals, and Elena struggled to discern which faces were masks and which bore genuine intent. Amid this maze, Luca Bellini remained a steadfast presence. By the water's edge, with the scent of salt and damp wood in the air, he lowered his voice. "You must be cautious, Elena. The city watches, and not all who smile wish you well." His loyalty was a balm amid the uncertainty, but the danger was ever present, growing with each tide. As night fell, Elena found herself alone in a shadowed piazza. The floodwaters mirrored the flickering lamplight, creating a kaleidoscope of light and darkness. Here, she pondered the complex web of politics and history that now ensnared her. Venice, with its timeless beauty, hid beneath the surface a darkness as deep and shifting as the waters themselves. Her resolve hardened. She would navigate these treacherous waters, trust sparingly, and press onward. The lines between friend and foe blurred in the rising tide, but Elena understood one truth clearly: to uncover Venice's buried secrets, she would have to embrace both the city's beauty and its shadows. Yet, as the night deepened, an uneasy question lingered in her mind: could she trust even those closest to her before the waters claimed all? The heavy air of the submerged chamber clung to Elena's skin as she knelt by the waterlogged crate, her fingers trembling as they brushed aside layers of silt and debris. The flickering beam of her flashlight danced across the brittle edges of parchments, the fragile manuscripts crinkling softly beneath her touch. This was the moment she had been chasing since her arrival in Venice, the tangible proof of a hidden past, long swallowed by the city's watery embrace. She unfolded one particularly delicate sheet, the ink faded but still legible in the dim light. The ornate script told stories of alliances forged and broken, of families whose names still echoed through the palazzi above. Her heart quickened when she saw the Vianney crest, a subtle but unmistakable mark linking the present to the Renaissance shadows. The manuscripts described secret pacts, betrayals that had shaped Venice's fate in ways no history book dared to reveal. Elena's breath caught when she read a passage detailing a clandestine meeting held on a night much like this one, the canals swollen and threatening to overflow. The conspirators had sworn to protect their power at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing the city's soul. She traced the faded ink with a finger, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on her. Suddenly, the muffled echo of footsteps above the water startled her. She snapped the documents shut and slipped them into a waterproof case. Rising silently, Elena made her way through the flooded corridors, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. The city around her was a maze of shadows and reflections, where every ripple seemed to whisper secrets. Later, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, Elena met Luca Bellini on a narrow canal. His gondola bobbed gently against the worn stone steps, the rhythmic splash of the oar breaking the silence. Luca's weathered face was etched with concern as he listened to her recount the discoveries. "The past is never truly buried here," he murmured, "but digging it up can drown you if you are not careful." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Marco Viani, emerging from the shadows with the practiced grace of a man born into power. His sharp eyes locked onto Elena's, a cold smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Curiosity is a dangerous tide, Signora Rossi," he warned softly, the menace beneath his words unmistakable. Elena met his gaze steadily, refusing to be cowed. Back in the sanctuary of the Venice State Library, Giulia Conti carefully laid out the recovered documents. The soft rustling of pages was the only sound as Elena scanned the texts, each revelation a step deeper into the labyrinth of deceit. The church bells tolled in the distance, their mournful chimes a haunting accompaniment to the truths unveiled. The weight of the past was no longer a distant echo, but a living threat. Elena knew that the conspiracy she had uncovered was not merely historical, it was a force that still shaped the city's present, and it was watching her every move. The waters outside continued to rise, swallowing Venice inch by inch, mirroring the tide of danger that crept ever closer. As darkness fell, Elena stood at the water's edge, the city's lights shimmering on the surface like fragile stars. She tightened her grip on the waterproof case, a symbol of hope and peril intertwined. Somewhere beneath the waves lay the truth, waiting to be brought to light, but at what cost? The shadows of the Renaissance were no longer confined to history, they had returned with a vengeance, and Elena was caught in their relentless current. Her mind raced with possibilities and threats. Marco Viani was more than just a hurdle. He was the embodiment of the corruption she sought to expose. Trust was a scarce commodity in this city of masks and mirrors, where every alley might harbor a dagger and every secret could be a death sentence. Yet, despite the isolation and danger, Elena's resolve hardened. The past demanded reckoning, and she would be its voice, even if it meant standing alone against the tides of betrayal. The Grand Palazzo loomed before Elena Rossi like a beacon of both allure and menace. Its tall windows aglow with warm light that spilled onto the cobblestone streets, slick with the Aqua Alta's rising tide. She adjusted the collar of her damp coat and took a deep breath, steeling herself to enter a world far removed from the damp alleys and murky canals she had grown accustomed to over the past weeks. Tonight, the elegant Isabella Moretti had extended an invitation, a rare opening into the city's high society and possibly a key to unraveling the elusive threads of the conspiracy that had haunted Elena's every step. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood, aged leather, and the faintest hint of jasmine. Crystal chandeliers hung from frescoed ceilings, fracturing the light into a kaleidoscope that danced across the gilded walls. Guests in tailored suits and shimmering gowns moved with practiced grace, their voices a soft murmur punctuated by polite laughter and the clink of fine glassware. Elena felt momentarily out of place, her practical attire a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Yet her piercing eyes scanned every corner, every face, searching for the subtle cues that might betray hidden motives. Isabella greeted her with a smile that did not quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Elena, so glad you could come," she said, her voice smooth as silk, but edged with something unreadable. "Venice has many stories to tell, and tonight, perhaps some will surface." Her words hung in the air, laden with insinuation. As the evening unfolded, Elena found herself drifting among clusters of guests, listening intently to conversations that skirted the surface of politics, art, and history. Beneath the polished veneer, she detected a current of tension, whispers of old grievances and unspoken debts. At one point, she caught a glimpse of a masked figure whispering urgently to Isabella, their eyes flashing with veiled warnings. The scene sent a shiver down Elena's spine. She realized that the alliances here were fragile and fraught with danger. Luca Bellini, ever vigilant, appeared at her side with a subtle nod. "Keep your guard, Elena," he murmured. "Not all smiles here are sincere." Their brief exchange was interrupted as Elena's gaze drifted to the terrace, where the moonlight glinted off the swollen canals. There, silhouetted against the dark water, stood Marco Viani. His sharp gaze scanned the gathering like a predator assessing its prey. The sight tightened the knot of apprehension in Elena's chest. Marco had always been a shadow looming over her quest, and tonight, his presence was a silent threat. As the night deepened, the aqua altar crept further into the city, seeping beneath doors and pooling across the marble floors of the palazzo's lower levels. Murmurs of concern rippled through the guests as their heels slipped on the wet stone. The gathering, once a glittering display of Venetian grandeur, began to fracture under the weight of the rising waters and the secrets they symbolized. Isabella's smile faltered for the briefest moment as she gestured for the guests to move upward, away from the flood. Elena followed, her mind racing. The encroaching water was more than a natural phenomenon. It was a metaphor for the delicate, facade Venice maintained beautiful and proud but on the brink of collapse. In a quiet moment on a balcony overlooking the flooded piazza, Elena whispered to Luca, "This city is drowning in secrets, and tonight, I've seen just how deep the waters run." He nodded gravely. "And some of those secrets are willing to drown anyone who tries to uncover them." The night ended with more questions than answers, but Elena felt a subtle shift in the currents around her. The conspiracy was no longer a distant mystery. It was a living, breathing force entwined with the city's very soul. As she stepped back into the rain-slicked streets, the cacophony of water and whispered threats followed her, a haunting reminder that beneath the mask of grandeur, Venice concealed a darkness that would not easily be washed away. With the floodwaters rising and the stakes higher than ever, Elena knew her journey had only just begun and that the path ahead would demand every ounce of her courage and cunning. The mask of elegance had slipped, revealing the treacherous depths beneath, and in those depths the truth awaited. The soft clatter of rain against the ancient window pane was a steady companion as Elena Rossi sat hunched over the fragile manuscripts that lay scattered across the worn wooden table in her small Venetian apartment. The dim light of a single oil lamp cast long shadows across the yellowed pages, illuminating the delicate ink strokes that had survived centuries beneath the water. Outside, the city was swallowed in the grey embrace of the aqua altar, the rising waters seeping through the labyrinth of canals and alleys, swallowing the familiar world whole. Elena's eyes traced the faded text again, each word a whisper from the past, a secret long submerged but now clawing its way back to the surface. She felt the weight of history pressing down on her, a burden far heavier than the dampness clinging to her clothes or the chill settling in her bones. These documents were not mere relics. They were testimonies of betrayal, manipulation, and a darkness festering beneath Venice's celebrated beauty. Her breath caught as she read a passage describing a clandestine pact forged centuries ago, a betrayal that had shaped the city's fate in ways no history book dared admit. The ink was smudged in places, water-damaged and fragile, but the message was unmistakable. The truth was far more complex and sinister than she had imagined. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She hesitated, her fingers stilling on the parchment. The knock came again, softer this time. Rising, she moved cautiously through the narrow hallway and opened the door to reveal Father Angelo, the elderly priest she had met a few days earlier in the shadowed chapel near the flooded piazza. His face was lined with years of quiet contemplation, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and wisdom. "May I come in, Elena?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Without waiting for a response, he stepped inside, the faint scent of incense trailing behind him. "The city is restless," he said softly, glancing toward the window where rain continued its relentless fall. "And so are its secrets." Elena gestured toward the table. "I've uncovered things I never expected. Things that make me question everything I thought I knew about Venice." Father Angelo nodded knowingly. "History is not just the chronicles in books or the tales passed down by elders. It is the spirit of a place, the echoes that linger beneath the stones and the water. Venice carries its past like the tide carries debris, sometimes hidden, sometimes crashing to shore with force. She studied him, searching his face for clues beyond his words. How do you bear it? The burden of knowing. He paused, his gaze distant. Faith and understanding. But also acceptance that some truths are heavier than we can carry alone. Venice's story is woven from light and shadow, and to grasp one without the other is to see only half the picture. Elena felt a shiver run through her, not from the cold, but from the weight of his counsel. The spiritual dimension of her discoveries added a new layer of complexity. This was not just an academic pursuit. It was a confrontation with the soul of a city. As Father Angelo prepared to leave, he placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. Be cautious, Elena. The waters rise, and so do the dangers for those who seek what lies beneath. But remember, even the deepest flood cannot drown the truth forever. After he left, Elena stood by the window, watching the floodwaters creep higher, seeping over the stone steps of the nearby piazza, swallowing benches and shopfronts alike. The reflection of the city's ancient bell tower shimmered in the murky water, distorted and trembling. She thought of the manuscripts, the hidden chamber she had yet to explore, and the shadowed figures who would stop at nothing to keep these secrets buried. The isolation she felt was profound. Her only allies were fragile pages and cryptic words, and her path was shrouded in uncertainty. Yet beneath the dread, a fierce determination burned. The truth demanded to be heard, no matter the cost. Later that evening, Elena took a solitary walk along the canal's edge, the water swirling around her boots as she paused beneath a wrought iron lamppost. The mist clung to the air, softening the harsh outlines of the city's architecture. Lights from distant windows flickered like distant stars, casting pale pools of gold onto the water's surface. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the damp, briny air, feeling the pulse of Venice beneath her feet, the city of water, secrets and shadows. The weight of history was immense, yet she felt, for the first time, a connection not just to the past, but to the future, a future that might be shaped by her courage to expose what had long been concealed. The night deepened, but Elena's resolve remained unshaken. The rising tide might threaten to engulf her, but she would not be swept away without a fight. Venice's story was hers to tell, and she would carry that burden as long as the waters flowed beneath her feet. And as the first light of dawn touched the flooded streets, casting a fragile glow over the city, Elena knew that the true test of her journey was yet to come, where history, faith, and betrayal would collide beneath the ever-watchful gaze of the Venetian sky. The dim light of the room cast long shadows over the water-stained walls, the faint drip of leaking rainwater echoing softly like a secret being whispered just out of reach. Elena Rossi sat hunched over a fragile manuscript, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the faded ink that seemed to unravel the threads of trust she had so carefully woven. The document was more than just a piece of history. It was a mirror reflecting the fractures in her own circle, the lines between friend and foe blurring with each page she turned. Outside, the city of Venice lay submerged beneath the relentless aqua alta, its flooded streets a labyrinthine maze of uncertainty and danger. Elena had grown accustomed to the water's steady encroachment, but nothing had prepared her for the tidal wave of betrayal that now threatened to engulf her. Earlier that evening, Luca Bellini had approached her with a wary expression, eyes darkened by concern and something unspoken. They met in a narrow piazza where the glow of gas lamps flickered against the shimmering surface of the flooded cobblestones. Luca's voice was low, almost a whisper against the soft patter of rain. "Elena, you don't know who's watching. Not everyone wants the truth to surface." She looked at him, the lines of fatigue etched deeply on his weathered face, and saw the conflict within a man torn between loyalty to his city and the fear of confronting the powerful families that still pulled the strings from the shadows. "I have to know," she replied quietly, "no matter the cost." Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Detective Dario Sartori, his presence as unyielding as the rising tide. His sharp eyes flicked between them, calculating and guarded. Though initially suspicious, Dario's growing recognition of Elena's conviction had softened his stance, forging an uneasy alliance fraught with unspoken tensions. "We need to be careful," Dario warned, his breath visible in the chill night air. "This isn't just about old documents, this is about people who will go to any lengths to protect their secrets." Elena nodded, the weight of his words sinking deep. She had already felt the cold edge of danger, the subtle threats that had shadowed her steps since her arrival. But the sting of betrayal was a wound far sharper, cutting through the fragile bonds she had relied on. Earlier that day, a trusted contact had revealed herself to be a conduit for those who wished to silence Elena's quest. The realization had shattered the sanctuary of trust Elena had clung to, leaving her isolated in a city where every smile might mask a dagger. As twilight descended, Elena found herself gazing out from a canal-side window, watching Isabella Moretti disappear into the warm glow of a lavish palazzo. Isabella's grace and poise concealed ambitions and fears as deep and shifting as the waters lapping at Venice's foundations. The cold light of the rising flood reflected the ambiguity of their relationship, a dance of alliances that could either protect or betray. With the city slowly succumbing to the flood, Elena's world had become a mirror of the Acqua Alta itself, beautiful yet treacherous, holding secrets beneath its surface that could either save or drown her. Every step forward demanded courage, every alley weighed against the possibility of deception. In the stillness of that waterlogged night, Elena made a silent vow. She would navigate this maze of shadows and tides, uncover the truth no matter the cost, and decide, in the end, who was truly worthy of her trust. The path ahead was uncertain, but Elena Rossi was no stranger to walking alone in the face of darkness. The city's secrets awaited her, buried beneath the waves, and she would confront them, crossroads of trust and betrayal converging beneath the rising tide. And somewhere in the distance, the water continued its relentless climb, swallowing the city's streets and whispering of the truths yet to surface. Elena Rossi stood at the edge of the canal, the Acqua Alta swelling around the ancient stone walls of Venice like a living, breathing entity. The water lapped gently, yet beneath its calm surface lay secrets that had festered for centuries, waiting for the right moment to resurface. With gloved hands, she reached into the murky water, feeling the rough texture of the submerged wooden chest beneath. Her heart beat faster as she carefully lifted the lid, water pouring out and revealing fragile bundles of manuscripts, their edges softened and worn by time and moisture. The fading light of dusk cast a grey haze over the city, the silhouettes of gondolas and crumbling palazzos blurring into the fog. Elena's breath caught as she extracted a parchment, the ink barely visible, but the script unmistakably ancient. She cradled it delicately, aware that one wrong move could undo decades of preservation. Each document was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal, manipulation, and power that had shaped Venice's history far beyond the romantic tales told to tourists. Back in a cramped, makeshift study room near the flooded piazza, Elena spread the manuscripts across a table cluttered with tools for preservation: brushes, dehumidifiers, and acid-free paper. Giulia Conti, the archivist from the Venice State Library, hovered nearby, her eyes sharp behind thin glasses as she handled each document with reverence. "These are remarkable," Giulia murmured, tracing her fingers over a faded map that depicted the city's waterways alongside cryptic annotations. "They challenge so many accepted stories. If these reach the public, they will change everything," Elena said, her voice low but resolute. "But that's why Marco Viani is desperate to silence us." The name hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Marco, the scion of a powerful Renaissance family, embodied the city's shadowy corruption. His influence seeped through Venice's politics and social circles like the floodwaters that now pressed against every doorway and threshold. Later that evening, Luca Bellini met Elena near a narrow alleyway where the water had risen ankle-deep. His weathered face was set with concern as he recounted a chilling encounter. "Marco was here," Luca said quietly, his gaze scanning the darkened streets. "He warned me to tell you to stop," said the city's stability depends on certain things staying buried. Elena's jaw tightened. He doesn't understand that stability built on lies is a fragile thing. We can't let fear dictate history. But the danger was real. The threats were no longer veiled whispers. They had taken shape in the form of shadowy figures watching her movements and subtle acts of sabotage against her research. One night, as Elena returned from the archive, she noticed footprints in the shallow floodwater leading toward her temporary quarters. Her pulse quickened. She was not alone. Inside, she found a hastily scrawled note pinned to the doorframe. "Some stones are better left unturned." The message was clear and chilling. Yet, despite the growing peril, Elena's determination deepened. She pored over the documents with Giulia, uncovering evidence that implicated not just Renaissance families, but also contemporary power brokers, politicians, business magnates, and cultural leaders, all entwined in a conspiracy that had shaped Venice's fate for centuries. Each revelation was a blow to the city's polished facade, exposing the rot beneath the grandeur. The water that adorned Venice's streets and alleys became a metaphor for the buried truths threatening to engulf them all. Elena's isolation grew, but so did her resolve. She could no longer trust everyone around her, not fully. Even Luca's unwavering loyalty was tempered by his fear for her safety and the city's fragile balance. The night deepened, and Venice's lights shimmered on the water's surface like distant stars trapped in a watery sky. Elena leaned over the table, the manuscripts spread before her like a map of shadows. Somewhere in this maze of ink and water lay the key to breaking the cycle of betrayal. But with Marco Viani closing ranks, wielding his influence like a weapon, the path forward was fraught with danger. The secrets she sought to unveil carried a price, one that might cost her more than she had ever imagined. As she prepared to dive back into the depths of the submerged archive the next day, Elena knew this was no longer just a quest for knowledge. It was a battle for the soul of Venice itself, and the tide was rising. The damp chill of the Venetian evening crept through the narrow alleys, curling around Elena Rossi like a cloak. The aqua altar had swollen the canals beyond their banks, water lapping at the foundations of centuries-old palazzi, transforming the city into a labyrinth of liquid pathways and shadowed corners. Elena's boots splashed softly on the slick stones as she made her way toward the cafe where Isabella Moretti had agreed to meet her. The door swung open with a tinkling bell, revealing a small, dimly lit room fragrant with the scent of strong coffee and aged wood. Elena's eyes adjusted quickly to the low light, settling on Isabella seated at a corner table, her posture regal despite the casual surroundings. The noblewoman's gaze was as cold and precise as the knife hidden behind her smile. "You relate," Isabella said, her voice smooth, but edged with a subtle reproach. "Traffic on the water is unpredictable," Elena replied, taking the seat opposite her. She studied Isabella carefully, the flawless silk dress, the diamond earrings catching the candlelight, the faintest crease of calculation at the corner of her mouth. Isabella leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "I hear your little excavation is causing quite a stir among the families. Dangerous waters you re-wading into." Elena's fingers tightened around her cup. The truth is always dangerous, especially when it threatens to expose long-buried secrets. A slow smile curved Isabella's lips. "Secrets are the currency of Venice. Some are better left underwater." The metaphor was not lost on Elena. The floodwaters outside mirrored the rising tensions within the city's elite, and within this very room. She pressed on. "Are you here to warn me, Isabella? Or to offer your support?" Isabella's gaze flickered, a shadow crossing her face before she masked it once more. "Perhaps both. But trust is a rare commodity these days. Be careful who you count as an ally." Elena left the cafe with her mind swirling. Isabella's words were both a warning and a challenge. Her ambiguous loyalties had become an obstacle she could no longer ignore. The social fabric of Venice was fraying, and Elena was caught in the middle, uncertain who would stand with her when the waters finally broke. Later that night, Luca Bellini met Elena at the edge of a narrow canal. His gondolier's uniform was damp from the mist, his face etched with concern. "They were watching you more closely now," he said quietly as he helped her into the boat. "Isabella's game is more complicated than it seems." The boat glided silently through the glassy water, the city's lights reflecting like jewels scattered on the surface. Every splash of the oar echoed in the stillness, a reminder of the precarious balance they all navigated. Elena nodded. "I need to know who I can trust." But trust seems as elusive as the tide. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Detective Dario Sartori, waiting on a bridge ahead. His dark coat was pulled tight against the cold, eyes sharp beneath his furrowed brow. "Elena," he called softly, "we need to talk. It's not safe to be out here alone." She stepped onto the bridge, the water swirling beneath their feet, carrying with it the secrets of the city. "You're remaking powerful enemies," Dario warned, "people who won't hesitate to silence you if you cross the wrong line." Elena looked into his eyes, searching for doubt or deception, but found only wary resolve. "I'm not planning to back down," she said firmly. "The past deserves to be uncovered, no matter the cost." Dario sighed, a mixture of admiration and caution in his voice. "Then you will need allies you can depend on, and a plan to survive the rising tide." As the Aqua Alta continued its relentless advance, Venice itself seemed to hold its breath. The Grand Palazzo, hosting the masked ball, was alive with music and laughter, a stark contrast to the undercurrents of fear and suspicion threading through the crowd. Elena moved through the throng, the ornate masks hiding faces both friendly and hostile. Whispers followed her like shadows, and every glance felt loaded with unspoken threats. She found Isabella across the room, a vision of elegance amid the swirling silks and glittering jewels. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the facade of civility cracked, revealing the war waging beneath. The night stretched on, a dance of alliances formed and broken, each step bringing Elena closer to a truth that could drown them all. The city's beauty was a delicate mask, concealing a roiling sea of betrayal and ambition. As dawn approached, Elena stood alone on a balcony overlooking the flooded piazza. The water shimmered beneath the pale light, a mirror to the turmoil in her heart. She knew the tides of suspicion were rising, and with them, the danger that threatened to consume Venice and herself. But retreat was not an option. The secrets beneath the surface demanded to be heard, and Elena Rossi was determined to listen, no matter the cost. The city held its breath, waiting for the next wave to break. The Aqua Alta had reached its zenith, and Venice lay transformed beneath a swollen sky, its labyrinth of canals swollen beyond their banks, the streets awash in shimmering, restless water. Elena Rossi stood at the edge of a flooded piazza, the water lapping gently at her boots, her breath misting in the cold night air. Lanterns hanging from wrought iron posts cast wavering, golden reflections on the rippling surface, while the distant toll of church bells echoed softly through the mist, a solemn herald of the storm that had long been gathering beyond the horizon. The city seemed to hold its breath, an ancient, silent witness to the unfolding drama. Elena's dark hair was pulled back tightly, strands damp from the humid air, her practical jacket clinging to her frame as she surveyed the empty square. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily upon her. For weeks, she had chased whispers beneath the water, piecing together fragments of a conspiracy that stretched back centuries, implicating the powerful families who had shaped Venice's destiny. Now the threads converged, and the shadows of history beckoned her toward a confrontation she could no longer avoid. From the shadows near the canal's edge, a figure emerged, tall, impeccably dressed, his gaze as sharp and cold as the waters surrounding them. Marco Vianney. His presence was as commanding as the tide itself, a living embodiment of the hidden corruption beneath Venice's glittering surface. The polished leather of his shoes gleamed even as the water threatened to encroach further, and his calculating eyes fixed steadily on Elena. "You've come far, Elena," Marco began, his voice low and smooth, carrying the weight of inherited power and ancient grudges. "But some stones are better left unturned, some waters left undisturbed." Elena met his gaze evenly, her own eyes blazing with a fierce determination that belied the vulnerability she felt within. "The truth is not a threat, Marco. It is a necessity. Venice deserves to know what lies beneath its beauty." A bitter smile curled at the corner of Marco's lips. "And yet, the truth can drown what we cherish most: stability, honor, legacy." Their words hung between them like a fragile bridge over the flooded piazza, the tension palpable as the city's ancient stones bore silent witness. Nearby, a gondola cut silently through the water, the soft splash of oars breaking the stillness. Luca Bellini, ever vigilant, guided his craft with practiced ease, his weathered face taut with concern as he watched the exchange unfold. His loyalty to Elena was unwavering, though the dangers seemed to multiply with each passing hour. "Elena," Luca called softly as he approached, "the city is watching. Be cautious." She nodded, appreciating the unspoken bond of trust between them. Yet even as allies gathered, the lines between friend and foe blurred. From a shadowed balcony above, Isabella Moretti observed the scene with an inscrutable expression. Her usual poise and grace concealed a turmoil beneath a flicker of doubt amid her cold calculation. The mask she wore so well threatened to slip, betraying the complexity of her loyalties and the ambitions that tied her to both Elena and Marco. As the night deepened, the floodwaters seemed to pulse with a life of their own, mirroring the escalating stakes. Elena knew that the forthcoming confrontation was more than a battle of wills. It was a reckoning that would determine the fate of Venice's buried secrets and the fragile peace that hung over the city like the mist rolling in from the lagoon. The gathering storm was not just in the swirling waters or the looming clouds overhead, it was in every whispered promise and every shadowed glance, in the fragile alliances forged and broken amid the tide. And as Elena squared her shoulders, ready to face the darkness, she understood that the path ahead was fraught with peril, yet illuminated by a fierce hope that truth, like water, would find its way. The city held its breath, and so did she, on the precipice of revelation and ruin, to be continued. The murmur of the rising aqua alta was a constant backdrop as Elena Rossi and Luca Bellini slipped through the narrow canals in the fading dusk. The city was transformed, its ancient stones submerged beneath a veil of water, reflecting the twilight like a fractured mirror. They approached a nondescript canal, its dark surface rippling under the gentle breeze. Elena's heart quickened. This was the place, the coordinates found in the fragile manuscripts from the earlier dives. With practiced ease, Luca maneuvered his small boat towards a concealed grate partially hidden beneath a tangle of algae and debris. Elena's lantern cast a narrow beam, illuminating the rusted iron bars and the faint outline of stone steps descending into shadow. This hidden entrance was a secret long forgotten by most, submerged beneath centuries of water and silence. "Are you sure about this?" Luca whispered, glancing nervously at the water that lapped just below the grate. "As sure as I can be," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the cold bite of the evening air. "If what we've found is true, this chamber holds the key to everything." Together they pried open the grate, the metallic screech echoing unnervingly through the stillness. Elena took a deep breath and descended the steps, the water rising to her knees. Luca followed, steadying the lantern that illuminated the subterranean chamber. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient wood, the silence punctuated only by the distant drip of water. Before them lay rows of glass-encased documents, manuscripts preserved in fragile stillness, their ink faded but legible under the careful glow of their lantern. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the archive, hidden beneath Venice's veins like a heartbeat long silenced. She knelt beside one case and carefully lifted the cover, revealing a stack of parchments yellowed with age. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded a map, its detailed markings revealing secret meeting points, coded symbols, and cryptic notes that challenged every accepted story of the city's Renaissance era. This changes everything," she murmured, eyes scanning the intricate lines and annotations. "These families, their alliances, their betrayals, it's all here." Luca's face was grave. "If this gets out, it could tear the city apart." Elena nodded, the weight of responsibility settling upon her. The conspiracy was no longer a shadow in the past, but a living threat, its tendrils reaching into the present. She glanced at the water outside the chamber's narrow window. The same water that had concealed these truths for centuries now seemed to threaten to drown them all. Suddenly, a faint splash echoed from above. Elena's breath caught as she peered through the murky window. A tall figure stood at the canal's edge, Marco Viani, his silhouette sharp against the fading light, his eyes cold and calculating. He watched her silently, a silent warning that the fight to protect these secrets was far from over. That night, Elena returned to her study. The chamber's documents spread before her like scattered pieces of a fractured puzzle. The rain tapped steadily on the window, a rhythmic reminder of Venice's fragile existence. She sat alone, the gravity of her discovery pressing down like the weight of the floodwaters outside. How much of this truth should she reveal? Could the city survive such upheaval? The beauty of Venice was a delicate veneer, beneath which corruption festered like a wound. To expose it risked not only her safety, but the very soul of the city she loved. Her fingers traced the edges of the parchments, her mind racing with possibilities and dangers. The archive was no longer just a collection of forgotten history, it was a battleground, and Elena stood at its center, poised between revelation and ruin. As the night deepened, so did her resolve. The answers lay beneath the surface, in the water and the shadows, waiting to be brought to light. But the question remained: at what cost? The aqua altar continued its relentless rise, echoing the swelling tide of secrets threatening to engulf them all. Elena's journey was far from over. Beneath the surface, the true story of Venice waited to be told. The sky hung low and leaden over Venice, the heavy clouds blending seamlessly with the rising waters that swallowed the narrow alleys and piazzas like a slow, inevitable tide. Elena Rossi stood at the edge of the flooded canal, the cold water lapping softly against the stone embankment beneath her worn boots. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight knot, strands dampened by the mist that clung to the city like a shroud. She drew a breath, the salty scent of the lagoon mingling with the musty odor of wet stone and ancient wood. Across the narrow expanse of water, Marco Viani appeared as if summoned by the very shadows that pooled beneath the Venetian facades. Tall and impeccably dressed despite the flooding, his sharp eyes glinted with a cold calculation that sent a shiver down Elena's spine. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, the privilege of centuries etched into the smooth lines of his tailored coat. Luca Bellini lingered discreetly behind Elena, his wiry frame blending into the gloom. His face, weathered by years under the Venetian sun and salt air, was taut with concern. He had warned Elena of the dangers before, but witnessing the man who embodied the city's darkest secrets now confronting her so directly brought the reality crashing down like the relentless aqua altar. "You should not have come here, Elena," Marco began, his voice low but slicing through the damp air like a blade. "There are things buried beneath these waters. The past is a dangerous thing to disturb." Elena met his gaze evenly, the piercing resolve in her eyes a stark contrast to the soft rippling of the canal. "The past belongs to everyone, Marco, not just to those who think they can rewrite it to protect their legacies." A faint, almost amused smile played at the corner of Marco's lips. "Legacies require protection. Stability demands it. You threaten to unravel centuries of order with your meddling." "Order built on lies," Elena replied sharply, "on betrayal and silence." The documents I've found fabrications, Marco interrupted, stepping closer so that the faintest ripple of water brushed their feet. Stories spun by those who want to see Venice fall apart. You are a fool to believe you can change what is already set in stone. The tension between them was palpable, as thick as the humid fog rolling in from the lagoon. Elena's mind raced, weighing each word, each subtle inflection. She knew this was more than a battle of ideology. It was a fight for the soul of Venice itself. Luca shifted behind her, the scrape of his oar against the submerged stones barely audible. His presence was a silent reassurance, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight, even as the city seemed to conspire against her. "You speak of stability," Elena said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "But what is stability if it demands the sacrifice of truth?" Marco's eyes narrowed. Truth is a luxury reserved for those with the power to wield it responsibly. You, Elena, are reckless. And you are afraid, she countered, afraid that the truth will drown you and your family's legacy, just as the rising waters threaten to drown Venice. For a moment, the two regarded each other in silence, the only sound the gentle slapping of water and the distant tolling of church bells. Around them, the city held its breath, the ancient stones absorbing the weight of their confrontation. "You don't understand," Marco said finally, his voice quieter, tinged with an almost imperceptible vulnerability. "I do this for Venice, for its future. Sometimes sacrifices must be made." Elena's gaze softened just a fraction, but her resolve did not waver. "Sacrifices made in darkness breed nothing but shadows. I will not let those shadows define this city's story." The floodwaters crept higher, spilling over the edge of the quay and swirling around their feet, blurring the boundaries between land and water, truth and deception. It was as if the city itself was challenging them, reminding them that beneath the beauty and grandeur lay depths as treacherous and unpredictable as the tides. Marco took a step back, his expression hardening once more. "This isn't over, Elena. The lines have been drawn. Choose your side carefully." With that, he turned and disappeared into the mist-shrouded alleys, leaving Elena standing alone at the water's edge, the weight of history pressing down on her like the floodwaters threatening to engulf the city. Luca approached, his voice low and steady. "You did well. But the danger grows. We must be cautious." Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon where the sun struggled to pierce the grey veil. "The city's fate is tangled in these waters, Luca, and so is mine, but I will not back down, not now." As the aqua alta continued its relentless rise, Elena felt the lines between past and present, friend and foe, truth and deception blur beneath her feet. The battle for Venice's soul had begun, and the city was holding its breath for the outcome. But deep beneath the surface, in the dark, murky depths of the canals, secrets waited patiently, ready to resurface and rewrite history once again. The confrontation was but a ripple in the vast tide of events, yet to come an opening salvo in a war fought not with swords, but with stories, shadows, and the unyielding power of the truth. Elena's journey was far from over. The waters were rising, and with them, the stakes. The city whispered around her, a timeless murmur of stone and water, secrets and betrayal, waiting for the dawn to bring its reckoning. Venice lay shrouded in a thick mist that clung to the labyrinth of canals like a silent shroud. The aqua alta had reached new heights, swallowing the city's streets and alleys, turning them into transient rivers where gondolas replaced footsteps and shadows whispered secrets beneath the flickering lamplight. Elena Rossi moved cautiously through the flooded passageways, each step a careful negotiation with the murky waters that threatened to betray her by swallowing a misstep. Her mind was a tempest of doubt and determination. The fragile alliances she had forged over the past weeks now trembled on the edge of collapse. The subtle threads that once bound her to allies like Isabella Moretti and Luca Bellini were fraying, worn thin by suspicion, fear, and conflicting loyalties. The evening had begun with a summons to one of Isabella's exclusive gatherings, a glittering affair, held within the gilded halls of a palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal. Elena had hesitated, aware of the risks, but the promise of information and the need to gauge Isabella's true intentions drew her in. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and expensive perfume, mingled with the faint saltiness of the encroaching tide. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across faces both familiar and foreign, their expressions guarded behind masks of polite indifference. Elena's eyes searched the crowd until they found Isabella, poised near a marble column, her posture graceful but rigid, her cold gaze unyielding. "Elena," Isabella greeted her with a slight nod, the warmth in her voice carefully measured. "I trust the city has not been too unwelcoming." "The Aqua Alta spares no one," Elena replied, her tone neutral, eyes narrowing slightly. "Nor does it spare secrets." Isabella's smile was thin, almost imperceptible. "Secrets are the currency of Venice, are they not? Some are meant to be kept, others revealed at the right moment." Their conversation was a delicate dance of words and insinuations. Elena pressed gently, seeking clarity about Isabella's stance, but the nobler woman remained an enigma, part ally, part adversary. Whispers floated around them, snippets of conversations laden with veiled threats and unspoken alliances. Elena felt the weight of centuries of history pressing down, intertwining with the present in a dangerous web. As the night deepened, Elena excused herself, her mind heavy with the realization that Isabella's loyalties were as fluid as the waters flooding the city. Trust would have to be earned, if at all. Outside, the mist had thickened, swallowing the edges of the palazzo. Luca Bellini awaited her by the canal, his brow furrowed, eyes shadowed with concern. He wore the traditional gondolier's striped shirt, but tonight, his usual calm demeanor was replaced by urgency. "We need to move, Elena," he said quietly, guiding her toward his gondola. "It's not safe here." The gondola sliced through the dark waters, the only sounds the gentle lapping against the boat's hull and the distant tolling of church bells. Luca's grip on the oar was tight, knuckles pale, as he navigated the winding canals with practiced ease. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The families are restless. Marco's reach grows stronger. There are eyes everywhere, and not all are friendly." Elena swallowed hard, the enormity of the threat settling like a stone in her stomach. Luca's protective instincts clashed with his pragmatism. He wanted to shield her from harm, but the danger was no longer just shadows and whispers, it was a tangible force closing in. Back in her small rented room, Elena sat by the window, the city's muffled sounds filtered through the rain. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across her notes and fragile manuscripts. She traced the faded ink with trembling fingers, the evidence of betrayal and manipulation unfolding before her eyes. But even as the truth revealed itself, Elena felt more isolated than ever. The people she had counted on were now sources of doubt. The city she loved seemed to turn against her with every rising tide. The floodwaters outside mirrored the turmoil within, relentless, unpredictable, and threatening to consume everything she held dear. A sudden knock at the door shattered her reverie. Heart pounding, Elena opened it to find Marco Vianney, his tall figure silhouetted against the dim corridor light. His calculating eyes met hers, cold and unyielding. "We must speak," he said smoothly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Venice is a delicate balance, Elena. It would be a shame to see it broken by reckless revelations." The room seemed to shrink around them, the threat in his presence palpable. Elena stood her ground, knowing that the coming days would demand every ounce of her courage and wit. The alliances she had once trusted now fractured beneath the weight of secrets and fear. In the city where water concealed as much as it revealed, Elena would have to navigate treacherous currents, not just of the canals, but of human hearts. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: survival meant learning to trust herself above all else. As the tide rose outside, swallowing the ancient stones of Venice, Elena prepared to face the storms both within and without, determined to unearth the buried truths, no matter the cost. The city's fate and her own hung in the balance, suspended between hope and betrayal, beneath the ever-watchful gaze of the water. And as the night deepened, the echoes of fractured alliances whispered through the flooded streets, carrying with them the promise of confrontation and the shadow of secrets yet to be uncovered. The rain had not ceased since dawn, a relentless percussion against the ancient Venetian rooftops, and the aqua altar was swelling with a merciless appetite. Elena Rossi stood in the dim light of her cramped apartment, listening to the water lap against the wooden beams just beneath her window. Outside, the city was slowly succumbing once again to the rising tide, the familiar but haunting rhythm of Venice's annual flood weaving itself into the fabric of her thoughts. Yet it was not just the water's advance that weighed heavy on her heart today. It was the betrayal that had seeped into her life like a silent poison. Earlier that evening, beneath the shadowed arches of a narrow canal, Elena had confronted Luca Bellini. The gondolier whose weathered face had once been a beacon of loyalty and pragmatism amidst the city's labyrinthine mysteries, now stood before her with eyes clouded by regret and fear. His confession had shattered the fragile trust they had built over the past weeks. A secret passed to Marco Vianney to protect his own family and preserve the delicate balance of power that governed Venetian society. The revelation cut through Elena like the cold water that had seeped beneath her boots, leaving her stunned and vulnerable. "Why, Luca?" After everything we've faced together, Elena whispered, her voice trembling as the waters stirred beneath them. Luca averted his gaze, the flicker of guilt unmistakable. "I never wanted to hurt you, Elena, but some tides are too strong to fight against. Marco, he promised he would keep the city safe. I believed him. I still do." The betrayal was a profound rupture, echoing the historic treacheries Elena had uncovered in the submerged archives. It was as if the city's very soul was mirrored in the fractured loyalties of its inhabitants. As she walked away from Luca, the flooded alley swallowed her footsteps, the water cold and unforgiving, a physical embodiment of the isolation that now enveloped her. Back in her apartment, the dim glow of a solitary lamp cast long shadows on the peeling walls, and Elena sank into a worn chair. The manuscripts and documents she had painstakingly preserved lay scattered across the table, fragile whispers from a forgotten past. Yet tonight, their fragile truths felt heavier, burdened by the immediate dangers pressing in from all sides. The floodwaters pressed against the city as relentlessly as the invisible forces seeking to silence her. She felt the weight of history and betrayal converge, a crushing pressure that threatened to drown both her resolve and her hope. Suddenly, a faint knock echoed through the quiet room. Elena's head snapped up, alert despite the exhaustion. Opening the door revealed Isabella Moretti, her elegant figure framed by the stormy night. The noblewoman's cold gaze held a mixture of calculation and something less decipherable, perhaps fear or an unspoken warning. "Elena," Isabella began, her voice smooth yet edged with urgency, "you must understand that the truths you seek come with a price. Venice cannot afford to lose its delicate balance." Elena regarded her warily, the lines between friend and foe blurring ever more. "And what do you want, Isabella?" "To offer a truce of sorts," Isabella replied, stepping inside as the rain intensified outside. "Our city's survival depends on navigating these treacherous waters together, however uneasy that alliance might be." The proposition hung in the damp air, complicated by the knowledge that Isabella's ambitions were as deep and murky as the canals themselves. Yet Elena knew she could not face the rising tide alone. The floodwaters outside surged higher, inundating the streets and alleys with a cold, inexorable force. Later, standing at the edge of a swollen canal, Elena watched as the water reflected the flickering lamplights and the encroaching shadows. The city was a mosaic of beauty and decay, history and betrayal, all submerged beneath the relentless tide. The flood was both a symbol and a reality, a force that could cleanse as much as it could destroy. Her heart heavy but her mind sharpened by loss, Elena whispered to the night, "I will uncover the truth. no matter the cost. The waters surged, and with them, the weight of betrayal pressed down. But Elena stood resolute, a solitary figure against the rising storm, ready to face the unknown depths that awaited beneath Venice's surface. The night deepened, and the city held its breath, caught between the past's shadows and the uncertain dawn to come. And somewhere hidden beneath the waves and secrets, the next chapter of Venice's story was waiting to be revealed. The candle's flame flickered, casting elongated shadows across the brittle parchment sprawled before Elena Rossi. The archival room, tucked away within the labyrinthine corridors of the Venice State Library, was steeped in silence save for the occasional rustle of turning pages and the distant patter of rain against stained glass. The scent of musty paper, tinged with a faint trace of salt from the ever-present aqua alta, filled the air, a sensory tether to centuries long past. Elena's fingers, gloved for preservation but steady with purpose, traced the delicate script on the manuscript she had uncovered only days before. The faded ink whispered secrets of a Venice that thrived not only on commerce and art but on shadows and silent bargains. Her analytical mind parsed the archaic Venetian dialect, piecing together fragments of correspondence, decrees, and personal journals that chronicled the city's Renaissance era, not merely a time of grandeur, but one rife with subterfuge and betrayal. Her breath caught when she read a letter penned by a nobleman whose name resonated with the families still powerful today. It spoke of alliance forged in darkness, of promises broken beneath the grandeur of frescoed ceilings and masked balls. The conspiracy she had sensed now unfolded with vivid clarity. A cabal of elite families had manipulated Venice's fate, orchestrating events to secure dominion over trade routes and political offices. The weight of centuries pressed down on her as she realized the depth of their deception, the meticulous weaving of lies that had shaped the city's destiny. A sudden knock at the library's heavy door startled her. It was Giulia Conti, the archivist, her eyes sharp behind thin spectacles. "Elena, you should see this," she said, producing a small bundle of parchments retrieved from a forgotten chest submerged beneath an old canal house. The documents were water-damaged yet legible, revealing a secret ledger that detailed illicit transactions and coded references to meetings held in the shadow of the Rialto. Together, they worked late into the night, the flickering candlelight their sole companion. Each discovery deepened the mystery names that re-emerged in modern times, their descendants still occupying positions of influence. Elena's heart thudded with a mixture of awe and dread. The past was not dead, it was alive beneath the surface, threatening to engulf the present. Her thoughts drifted to Luca Bellini, the gondolier who had become her steadfast ally. His knowledge of Venice's hidden waterways and forgotten passages had been invaluable. She found herself yearning for his grounded pragmatism amidst the storm of her revelations. They met later that evening in a cramped corner of a flooded palazzo, the water seeping through ancient stones, lapping softly at their boots. "The more you uncover," Luca murmured, "the more dangerous it becomes. These families, they don't want to be exposed." Elena nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light. "But if we don't bring this to light, the city remains captive to their shadows." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Father Angelo, an enigmatic figure whose spiritual guidance and knowledge of Venice's history had offered Elena moments of clarity. In the vaulted sanctuary of San Giorgio Maggiore, the echoes of his voice blended with the tolling bells and the gentle drip of water through centuries-old stone. "History," he intoned solemnly, "is not merely what is recorded but what is concealed. To confront the past is to embrace both its beauty and its darkness. You carry a heavy burden, Elena. Remember, some truths are like the water that surrounds us, persistent, shifting, and sometimes drowning those who seek to grasp them." His words resonated deeply as Elena returned to her study, determination hardening within her. The archives were more than relics. They were keys to unraveling a tapestry of deceit woven through generations. Yet, with each revelation, the stakes climbed higher. Marco Vianney's shadow loomed ever larger, his calculated moves a reminder that the past's ghosts were not content to rest. Elena's mind raced with strategies to protect the archive and those who aided her. Trust was a scarce commodity in Venice's flooded streets and marble halls. She resolved to tread carefully, choosing her confidence with care as the waters of betrayal rose around her. Night deepened outside, and the city's ancient stones seemed to whisper secrets through the mist. Elena closed the fragile manuscripts, her gaze fixed on the flickering flame, a symbol of hope against the encroaching darkness. The history of shadows was no longer distant, it was her present, and the future of Venice depended on the choices she would make in the days to come. As she extinguished the candle, the last tendrils of light danced upon the water-stained walls, mirroring the turbulent currents that ran beneath Venice's serene surface. The past was awakening, and with it, the echoes of betrayal threatened to surge forth once more. Elena's journey was far from over. The shadows of history awaited, and she must confront them or be consumed in their depths. The city held its breath, and so did she. The city of Venice awoke slowly beneath a veil of mist. The early morning light diffused through the damp air that clung to every brick and canal. Elena Rossi sat quietly in the bow of a small boat, the gondolier's rhythmic oar strokes stirring the water with soft, hypnotic pulses. Around her, the labyrinthine canals stretched like veins through the ancient city, the buildings rising steep and silent from the water's edge, their worn facades whispering stories of centuries past. This morning was different. The aqua alta had crept higher than usual, swallowing the narrow streets and turning piazzas into lakes. The water lapped hungrily at the base of palazzi, reflecting shattered shards of dawn in ripples that danced like secrets just beneath the surface. Venice was alive, but it was a city drowning in its own history, a blend of breathtaking beauty and concealed corruption. Elena's mind raced as she absorbed the scene. Every corner of the city seemed to hold another fragment of the submerged archive she had painstakingly unearthed. Each fragile manuscript she had preserved whispered of betrayals, manipulations, and alliances that stretched from the Renaissance to the present day. The water was not merely a physical presence here. It was a symbol, a mirror of the hidden depths beneath the city's glittering veneer. As the gondola glided silently beneath a stone archway, Elena saw Luca Bellini waiting on a small wooden dock. His weathered face was drawn tight with concern, the lines etched by years of sun and salt water seeming sharper in the gray light. He greeted her with a nod, but said nothing until they were settled on a bench beside a flooded alley. "Elena," Luca began quietly, "this city is a living thing. It breathes beneath the water, and it protects its own. But the families who hold power, they will do anything to keep their secrets buried." Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the tension there between loyalty to Venice's people and fear of the powerful forces she was challenging. "I understand," she replied, "but if we don't bring these truths to light, how can the city ever heal?" He sighed, the sound lost in the stillness. "Sometimes the price of truth is too high." Their conversation hung in the air like the thick fog around them, a reminder that every step Elena took deeper into the mystery was fraught with danger. Later, Elena found herself at an opulent palazzo perched above the Grand Canal. The grandeur of the ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, gilded mirrors reflected the swirl of silks and jewels, and the scent of expensive perfume mingled with the faintest hint of dampness from the flooding outside. Guests moved with practiced grace, their smiles polite but eyes sharp and calculating. Isabella Moretti stood at the center of the gathering, a vision of elegance and control. Her cold gaze swept the room, masking the ambitions and fears that lay beneath. Elena watched closely, aware that every word and gesture here was a piece on a complicated chessboard. "Venice has always been a city of masks," Isabella said softly when Elena approached. "Not all are worn on the face. Some hide the truth in plain sight." Elena nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle over her like the damp air. Here, in the heart of power, history's shadows were alive and watching. As evening fell, Elena escaped to a crumbling stone bridge, the rain beginning to fall in thin, cold sheets. She stood alone, the city's lights shimmering in the water below, distorted and fragile. From the mist, a figure emerged, Marco Viani, his tall frame silhouetted against the fog. "You can't undo what was done," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "Some secrets are safer beneath the waves." Elena met his gaze, unflinching despite the chill that ran through her. "But the truth will surface, Marco. Like the water, it cannot be held back forever." He turned away, dissolving into the night, leaving Elena with the heavy realization that the battle for Venice's soul was far from over. As the rain intensified, Elena felt the city pulse around her, the silent canals, the whispered histories, and the endless dance of light and shadow. Venice was a city drowned in secrets, its beauty inseparable from the darkness beneath, and she was caught in the tide, determined to see the truth rise. The night deepened, and with it, the questions that would shape her journey. How much could she reveal without destroying the delicate balance of this city she had come to love? And in the end, would the water wash away the past, or would it carry the secrets forward, forever hidden beneath the surface? Elena pulled her coat tighter against the damp chill, her eyes scanning the horizon where the city's lights blurred into the mist. The rain had not ceased since dawn, its persistent drumming on the ancient stone and shuttered windows of the Palazzo della Chivio creating a constant, insistent rhythm. Elena Rossi sat cross-legged on the damp floor of a forgotten chamber deep beneath Venice, the flicker of a lone lantern casting trembling shadows across the fragile manuscripts spread before her. Each parchment was a delicate fragment of history, water-stained, faded, yet imbued with the power to rewrite the story of the city itself. Her fingers moved cautiously, tracing the elegant script of a letter penned centuries ago. It was a confession, veiled in cryptic language but unmistakable in its implications. Betrayal at the heart of Venice's ruling families. Conspiracies that had steered the fate of the city through deceit and bloodshed. Elena's breath caught as the pieces she had assembled over weeks crystallized into a damning portrait of corruption. Outside, the aqua altar had reached its zenith. The canals overflowed, swallowing piazzas and alleys in a rising tide that distorted the familiar into something alien and threatening. The water's relentless advance was a mirror of the dangers closing in on Elena herself. A sudden shiver ran down her spine. She was not alone. Footsteps echoed faintly above the chamber, muffled by layers of stone and water but unmistakably deliberate. Elena's eyes flicked to the narrow stairwell leading upward. The shadows whispered secrets, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Above the surface, Marco Viani stood at the water's edge, the glow of the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson. His figure was tall, imposing an embodiment of the power and menace lurking beneath Venice's veneer of beauty. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the flooded streets as he spoke briefly into a phone, his voice low but resolute. "She's too close. The archive must be destroyed. No loose ends." His words were a decree of silence, an order that would set into motion a cascade of events threatening to engulf all who dared uncover the truth. Back in the hidden chamber, Elena's hand trembled as she gathered the final documents. The weight of history pressed down on her, but so too did the urgency of the moment. Each discovery was a step deeper into a labyrinth of shadows and danger. A sudden splash echoed from the canal outside, and the sound of oars cutting through water reached her ears. Luca Bellini's familiar silhouette emerged from the gloom, his gondola bobbing gently against the flooded quay. His weathered face was etched with concern, but his eyes held steady determination. "Elena," he whispered urgently as he helped her aboard. They were closing in. "We have to move now." Together, they slipped through the labyrinthine waterways, the floodwaters swallowing the city in a silent, watery embrace. The buildings loomed overhead like ancient sentinels, their reflections fractured in the churning water. The city was a ghost, beautiful and fragile, hiding secrets as deep and treacherous as the canals themselves. From a balcony above, Isabella Moretti watched the unfolding scene. Her graceful silhouette was framed by ornate stonework, her gaze inscrutable as the wind tugged at her silk gown. The rising waters reflected in her cold eyes, mirroring the tempest of loyalties and fears that churned within her. She was a woman caught between worlds, between family duty and personal ambition, between the past's shadows and the uncertain future. Her silence was as telling as any word, a signal that the coming storm would test even the most carefully guarded alliances. As night deepened, Elena and Luca navigated the darkening canals, the city's heartbeat quickening with the rising tide. Every ripple, every distant echo of footsteps, reminded Elena that the edge of revelation was razor-thin. The truth was within reach, but so too was the abyss. Elena's mind raced with possibilities and fears. Could she protect the archive long enough to bring the conspiracy to light? Or would the waters, like the secrets beneath them, swallow her whole? In the heart of Venice, under the watchful eyes of ghosts and shadows, the battle for truth and survival was about to begin. The Aqua Altar was more than a flood, it was a reckoning. And Elena Rossi stood at its edge, ready to dive into the depths, whatever they might hold. The lantern's glow flickered as Elena carefully aligned the final document with the others. The script was unmistakable, the signature of a forgotten noble, his words a testament to centuries of betrayal and silence. Each page was a thread in a tapestry that, once unraveled, threatened to bring the city's most powerful families to their knees. Luca, Elena whispered, her voice steady despite the storm raging both outside and within her. This is it. This is what they've been trying to hide. Luca nodded grimly, his calloused hand steady on the gondola's oar. They won't stop, Elena. Marco Viani will do anything to keep this buried. The gondola slipped silently through a flooded call, the water reflecting the fractured lights of lanterns and street lamps. The city seemed to hold its breath, each wave a pulse of tension. Suddenly, a shadow moved along the water's edge, too deliberate to be a trick of the light. Elena's heart hammered as she peered into the darkness. Marco, Luca murmured, his voice low. He's here. Elena swallowed hard, the chill of the night mingling with the fire of resolve. There was no turning back. The confrontation was inevitable. As they reached a secluded dock, Elena gathered the documents close. The weight of history and the danger it brought pressed down on her like the rising floodwaters. She was on the edge of revelation, and the city's fate hung in the balance. The Aqua Altar was at its peak. The time for hiding was over. The flooded piazza lay silent beneath a thick blanket of fog, the waters reflecting the ghostly outlines of Venice's ancient palazzi. Elena Rossi moved cautiously, her boots submerged up to the ankles as the Aqua Altar encircled the square like an unpredictable predator. Every step sent ripples across the water's glassy surface, disrupting the eerie stillness that clung to the night. Her breath came out in small plumes, the cold air biting at her skin beneath her soaked jacket. She clutched the fragile bundle of manuscripts tightly beneath her arm, their delicate pages threatening to crumble with every movement. Tonight everything depended on this confrontation. From the shadows of an archway, a tall figure emerged, Marco Viani. His silhouette was sharp and imposing, the dark fabric of his coat clinging to him as if forged from the night itself. His eyes, cold and calculating, held a hint of reluctant respect as he regarded Elena. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice smooth but laced with warning. "Some truths are better left buried beneath the water." Elena squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze without flinching. "The past belongs to everyone, Marco. It's time the city remembered what has been hidden for centuries." Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of conviction born from months of tireless investigation and growing peril. Behind her, Luca Bellini stood watch, his weathered face taut with tension. The gondolier's loyalty had never wavered, even as the city's shadows deepened around them. "You're outnumbered, Elena," Marco continued, stepping closer so that the faint scent of salt and dampness mixed with his cologne. "You don't understand the forces you re-challenging. This isn't just about history. It's about power, survival." Isabella Moretti's delicate footsteps echoed softly as she approached from a side alley, her presence both graceful and unsettling. Draped in an elegant cloak that shimmered faintly in the moonlight, she regarded the scene with a mixture of curiosity and cold calculation. "Power is a fragile illusion," she murmured, her voice barely above the whisper of the water, "and secrets are its currency." Elena's eyes flickered to Isabella, recalling the countless moments of ambiguity and veiled threats that had punctuated their uneasy interactions. "Why are you here?" Elena demanded. "Which side do you stand on?" Isabella smiled faintly, a mask of inscrutability. "I stand where Venice's future demands. But tonight, the past takes center stage." Marco's expression darkened. "Enough theatrics. Elena, hand over the documents. Destroy the archive, and none of this need escalate further." The weight of his words hung heavily in the damp air, but Elena's resolve only hardened. "I will not let fear dictate the city's history. The people deserve to know the truth about your family, about the betrayals that shaped this place." A bitter laugh escaped Marco. "Truth. You mistake exposure for justice. You threaten the very stability that keeps Venice alive." Suddenly, the water around their feet shifted as if responding to the tension. Luca stepped forward, his voice low but unwavering. "Venice isn't just power and secrets. It's resilience, something you've forgotten." At that moment, a shadow moved swiftly along the piazza's edge, a figure once trusted, now revealed as a traitor. The betrayal cut deep, unraveling years of fragile alliances and forcing Elena to recalibrate her understanding of friend and foe. The shock was palpable, the betrayal a sharp blade slicing through the night stillness. Marco seized the moment, advancing with a calculated glare. But Elena, fueled by a fierce determination and the support of Luca and the fragile truth in her hands, met him head-on. Words became weapons, each argument a strike aimed to dismantle centuries of silence and deception. As the confrontation reached its peak, the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon. The floodwaters began their slow retreat, revealing the worn stones of the piazza beneath. Exhausted, soaked to the bone, and emotionally battered, Elena stood her ground. The archive's fate was sealed not just in the fragile manuscripts she carried, but in the hearts of those who now knew the cost of silence. Marco retreated into the shadows, defeated but unbroken, promising that the battle for Venice's soul was far from over. Isabella lingered a moment longer, her gaze lingering on Elena with a mixture of respect and calculation before disappearing into the awakening city. In the quiet aftermath, Luca placed a steadying hand on Elena's shoulder. "You did what had to be done." Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the empty piazza now bathed in golden light. Though the confrontation had ended, the echoes of betrayal and the weight of history would ripple through Venice like the waters, surrounding them unpredictable, deep, and eternal. Yet beneath the surface of exhaustion and doubt, a fierce hope kindled. The city, like her, was resilient. And as long as there were those willing to confront its shadows, the truth could not be drowned forever. But the question lingered, heavy and unresolved, in unveiling the past. What new storms might be unleashed upon the fragile beauty of Venice? The waters whispered their secrets, and Elena listened, ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the storm was a slow awakening. Venice, bruised but unbowed, began to shed the heavy cloak of aqua alta that had cloaked its labyrinthine streets in shadow and uncertainty. Elena Rossi stood on the edge of the piazza, where the water had once reached its highest tide, now retreating in steady, reluctant trickles. The rising sun pierced through the thick remnants of storm clouds, scattering shards of golden light that danced across puddles and wet cobblestones, casting an ephemeral glow on the battered city. Her breath fogged in the crisp morning air as she surveyed the scene, a city scarred yet resilient, its beauty marred but unyielding. The confrontation with Marco Viani had left more than just physical traces. It had carved deep fissures into the delicate fabric of Venetian society. The shadows of betrayal still lingered, but for the first time in weeks, there was an unmistakable sense of fragile hope. Elena's mind was a tempest of conflicting emotions. The archive she had uncovered, the centuries-old conspiracy she had exposed, and the lives entangled in its web each weighed heavily on her conscience. She had wrestled with the question of how much to reveal, knowing that the truth could both liberate and devastate. The fragile peace settling over Venice demanded careful stewardship. The sound of footsteps drew her attention. Luca Bellini approached, his weathered face etched with concern and relief. His gondolier's jacket was soaked, clinging to his wiry frame, but his hands were steady as ever, a reassuring presence amidst the uncertainty. "The city breathes again," Luca said softly, nodding toward the receding waters. "But the scars remain." Elena nodded, her eyes distant. "Scars that tell a story no one wants to hear." They moved toward a quiet corner cafe by the canal, its shutters flung open to welcome the returning light. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and brewing coffee, punctuated by the gentle drip of water from the eaves. As they settled into battered chairs, the muted sounds of the city-distant church bells, the occasional splash of a returning gondola, filled the space between them. "Do you think Venice can heal?" Luca asked, his voice low, laden with the weight of years lived in this city of secrets. Elena hesitated. "It must. But healing requires more than water receding. It demands truth, reconciliation, and courage." Their conversation was interrupted by a discreet figure entering the cafe. Isabella Moretti, elegant despite the dampness clinging to her impeccably tailored coat, took a seat nearby. Her gaze met Elena's across the room, a brief, charged exchange that spoke volumes. The coldness in Isabella's eyes had softened, replaced by a tentative vulnerability, a silent truce forged in the fires of shared hardship. Later that day, Elena found herself walking through the shadowed nave of a centuries-old church. The flicker of candlelight illuminated ancient frescoes depicting saints and sinners alike, their stories etched in time, much like the conspiracy she had uncovered. Father Angelo stood at the altar, his simple cassock damp from the town's relentless moisture, his face carrying a gentle yet pained expression. He turned to Elena, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "The city's soul is tested, child. But remember, even in darkness, there is light." Elena felt the weight of his words settle within her, mingling with the complex tapestry of history and human frailty she had come to know so intimately. The floodwaters had receded, but the echoes of betrayal and courage would ripple through Venice forever. As dusk fell, Elena returned to her modest lodgings, the city's heartbeat slow and steady around her. She opened a journal, pen poised to capture the delicate balance she had chosen, the truths to tell, the secrets to guard, the path forward. The amber light of the setting sun cast long shadows over the flooded streets of Venice as Elena Rossi stood alone on the wrought iron balcony of her temporary residence. Below, the canals shimmered with the reflection of burning skies, the water swallowing the city as if it sought to erase centuries of whispered secrets and hidden betrayals. Elena's eyes traced the ripples, her mind awash with the fragments of truth she had uncovered, the manuscripts, the letters, the faded seals of families whose names still resonated through the marble palazzi and silent piazzas. And yet, the question that haunted her was not what she had found, but what she must do with it. The weight of history pressed down upon her like the waters that threatened to engulf Venice each year. She had come seeking knowledge, driven by a passion that was part professional curiosity and part personal legacy. Her great-grandfather's connection to the city was no longer just a line in a family tree. It was an invitation to confront the shadows lurking beneath the surface of Venice's grandeur. But now, standing at the crossroads between exposure and discretion, Elena felt the fragile balance of justice and preservation tremble beneath her feet. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Luca Bellini entered quietly, his weathered face lined with concern beneath the fading light. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "the city holds its breath. What will you do with this truth?" She turned to him, the piercing eyes that had become her signature softened by uncertainty. "I don't know," she admitted. "Some of what we've found could shatter everything: reputations, families, the very identity of Venice itself. But hiding it feels like betrayal, a complicity in the lies that have festered for centuries." Luca nodded, his gaze drifting to the glowing canals below. "There is a price to truth," he said quietly. "And sometimes the cost is more than we are willing to pay." The next evening brought a summons Elena could not ignore. Isabella Moretti awaited her in the grand salon of a Venetian palazzo. The room awash with the glow of crystal chandeliers and the muted buzz of whispered conversations from distant rooms. Isabella's elegance was undiminished by the years, her cold gaze as sharp as ever as she gestured to a chair opposite her. "Elena," Isabella began smoothly, "you stand at a precipice. The truths you hold could either cleanse or poison this city. Have you considered the consequences of your revelations?" Elena met her gaze steadily. "I have, but the people deserve to know. The past cannot be rewritten to protect fragile pride." Isabella's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Prudence is not betrayal, Elena. Venice is a living mosaic of beauty and darkness. Unleashing all truths at once may fracture it beyond repair." Their conversation danced between veiled threats and fragile alliances, each woman weighing the cost of transparency against the imperative to protect. Elena left the palazzo with a heavy heart, the city's fate resting uneasily in her hands. Seeking solace, Elena found herself walking the narrow streets toward the ancient church where Father Angelo awaited. The scent of incense mingled with the damp stone air as she followed him into the hushed sanctuary. His voice, calm and measured, echoed softly as he spoke of history's burdens and the grace found in forgiveness not just for others, but for oneself. "Truth," he said, "is a river that carves its own path. Sometimes we must choose to dam its flow, to protect the fragile life around it, while tending the roots of understanding beneath the surface." Elena listened, the priest's words settling deep within her conflicted soul. She realized that the struggle was not just external, but internal, a fight to reconcile the desire for justice with the wisdom of mercy. In the pre-dawn stillness of the canals, Luca and Elena shared a moment of quiet reflection aboard a gondola. The mist curled around the ancient buildings, muffling the city's usual symphony. Their conversation was soft but charged with unspoken fears and cautious hope. "Whatever you decide," Luca said, "know that you are not alone. Venice has always been a city of secrets, but it is also a city of resilience." Elena gazed into the watery depths, the first light of dawn breaking through the fog. "I must find the path that honors both truth and the lives intertwined with it," she murmured. As the gondola glided onward, the city slowly awakened, and with it, the enduring mystery of Venice, beautiful, betrayed, and forever beneath the surface. But the choice remained: how much truth could she bear to reveal, and at what cost? The waters were rising once more, and Elena knew that whatever path she chose, the price of truth would be paid in full. Her journey was far from over. The echoes of the past still whispered beneath the waves, waiting for their moment to rise. The narrow alleyways of Venice were quieter now, the torrents of aqua alta finally receding like a breath released after a long-held suspense. Elena Rossi walked slowly along the canal's edge, her footsteps muffled against the ancient stones, still damp from the flood's recent kiss. The late afternoon sun filtered through a patchwork of clouds, casting a golden shimmer that danced upon the gentle ripples of the water. Each reflection seemed to hold a story, a whisper from the depths below that beckoned her to listen. She paused, eyes tracing the fluid surface, where the light fractured and reassembled endlessly, much like the secrets she had uncovered in the submerged archive. The water was both a veil and a mirror, concealing and revealing, nurturing and eroding. It was a paradox that mirrored Elena's own journey. The thrill of discovery mingled with the dread of betrayal. A beautiful city forever marked by its hidden shadows. Behind her, the muted tolling of church bells echoed softly across the labyrinthine city, a somber cadence that seemed to mark time itself. Venice, she thought, was a city of echoes of footsteps, of voices long silenced, of histories submerged beneath layers of varnished grandeur. And she, a solitary figure amidst the wending canals, was now a keeper of some of those echoes. The damp scent of the water mingled with the faint aroma of salt and old stone, grounding her in the present even as her mind drifted through centuries past. Memories surfaced of her great-grandfather's whispered tales, of manuscripts crumbling beneath her careful hands, of shadowed glances exchanged at opulent gatherings. The city's pulse, once threatening to engulf her with its secrets, now beat steadily beneath the surface. Turning away from the canal, Elena made her way to a nearby chapel, its heavy wooden doors creaking softly as she pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of incense and the quiet weight of history. Father Angelo stood by an altar, his gentle eyes meeting hers with a knowing calm. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the weathered stone walls, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to recede entirely. The water, he began in his soft, measured tone, it carries the past, but it also cleanses. It is both blessing and curse. Elena nodded, feeling the resonance of his words deep within her bones. I have seen how it hides truths and reveals them, sometimes in the same breath. Father Angelo smiled faintly. Venice is a city built on contradiction. It thrives because it embraces the fluidity of life, the ebb and flow of time, memory, and trust. You, Elena, have become part of that flow. Their conversation lingered, weaving through the spiritual and the temporal, before Elena stepped back into the twilight. Outside, the canals gleamed under a sky now brushed with hues of violet and rose. Luca Bellini awaited her at the dock, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. Together they slipped into his gondola, the oars' rhythmic dip and pull a soothing counterpoint to the city's uneasy heartbeat. Gliding silently through the restored waterways, Elena's thoughts drifted to the people she had met, the alliances forged and broken. The city looked peaceful, almost untouched by the chaos that had unfolded, yet beneath the tranquil surface lay currents of unresolved tension. It was a delicate balance, much like the fragile manuscripts that had first drawn her here. At one point, the gondola passed a partially submerged doorway, its wrought iron gate barely visible beneath the clear water. Elena leaned forward, the water lapping gently against the wood, and for a moment, she imagined the voices of the past rising from the depths, whispered confessions, forgotten promises, the silent lament of betrayal. She shivered, not from cold but from the weight of what she had uncovered. The conspiracy was not simply a shadow of history. It was a living thing entwined with the city's soul. Yet, as the gondola carried her forward, Elena felt a quiet resolve settle within her. Some secrets, like the water of Venice, could never be fully contained or controlled. They were part of the city's identity, part of her own. Her fingers brushed the edge of a worn notebook, the last piece of the archive she held close. The knowledge it contained was both a burden and a gift, a reminder that history was never truly past, that every truth uncovered shaped the future in ways unseen. As night began to fall, the lights of Venice flickered on, casting golden pools across the canals. Elena looked out across the water, feeling both the solitude and strength of her place in this ancient city. The echoes in the water were hers now to bear, to protect, and to honor. Her journey was far from over, but in this moment of quiet reflection, she embraced the profound mystery of Venice, a city forever shimmering between light and shadow. Truth and silence, life and the depths beneath the surface. And as the gondola moved steadily onward, the city whispered its timeless invitation to listen, to remember, and to never forget the echoes in the water. The first rays of dawn spilled softly over the Venetian skyline, casting a gentle glow on the labyrinth of canals that had, for weeks, been transformed into a watery maze. Elena Rossi stood silently on the ancient stone bridge near Campo Santa Margherita, the cold touch of the early morning air brushing against her face. Below, the water's surface rippled gently as the last traces of the aqua altar began their slow retreat. The city, battered but unbowed, seemed to breathe again with a quiet resilience. She inhaled deeply, the scent of damp stone and briny water mingling with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread wafting from a nearby bakery. This was a Venice reborn, scarred yet beautiful, its spirit as enduring as the centuries-old stones beneath her feet. Elena's journey through the flood's turmoil had changed her in ways she was still reckoning with. The submerged archive, once a whispered legend, had emerged from the depths to reveal a history tangled with deception, power, and betrayal. Now, as the city dried, so too did the immediate danger, yet the shadows of what had been uncovered lingered heavily on her mind. From the corner of her eye, a familiar silhouette approached Luca Bellini, his weathered face creased with a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. His gondolier attire, slightly damp from the night's lingering moisture, bore the marks of their recent escapades, navigating flooded alleys and secret waterways. "Elena," he greeted, his voice low but steady, "the city's waking up. Looks like we made it through." She smiled faintly, a warmth blossoming despite the exhaustion that clung to her bones. "Yes, Venice is waking, and so must we." They stood side by side, watching as boatmen prepared their vessels, merchants tidied their stalls, and children, long confined indoors, tentatively ventured out to explore the transformed landscape. The floodwaters had swallowed much, but they had also uncovered truths that could no longer be ignored. Their conversation drifted naturally towards what lay ahead. Elena knew her role had shifted from a solitary seeker of knowledge to a protector of fragile truths. The archive's manuscripts had been secured, but the questions they raised demanded answers, and those answers carried risks. As the morning wore on, Elena made her way to a discreetly arranged gathering in a restored palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal. Here, Venice's elite mingled beneath frescoed ceilings and crystal chandeliers, their laughter and polite conversation a delicate veneer over undercurrents of unease. Isabella Moretti, ever the epitome of grace, moved among the guests with effortless charm, her cold eyes briefly meeting Elena's in a subtle challenge. Their exchange was a reminder that beneath the city's beauty lay a complex web of power and ambition. Isabella represented a faction, still invested in controlling the narrative of Venice's past and its future. Yet even she seemed touched by the recent upheavals, her usual certainty tempered by the undeniable force of change. Later, as twilight settled over the city, Elena found herself alone on the waterfront, the last traces of sunlight shimmering on the calm waters. Across the canal stood Marco Viani, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. His expression was inscrutable, a mixture of defeat and defiance. Though his attempts to suppress the archive had faltered, his presence was a stark reminder that the conspiracy's legacy was far from extinguished. Elena met his gaze steadily, aware that their conflict was only part of a larger struggle, one that would shape Venice's destiny in the years to come. As night deepened, the city's lights reflected in the quiet waters, a kaleidoscope of hope and lingering secrets. Elena turned away, her resolve firm. Venice had survived the flood, as she would survive the challenges ahead. Some secrets, like the waters of the canals, might never be fully contained, but they could be guarded, respected, and ultimately revealed when the time was right. The dawn of a new day in Venice was not just a return to normalcy, but an awakening. For Elena, the journey was far from over. The city's beauty endured, but so did its shadows. And in those shadows, the echoes of history whispered still, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. With a final glance at the shimmering canals, Elena stepped forward into the uncertain future, ready to protect the fragile legacy she had uncovered, and to face whatever tides awaited her beneath the surface. The morning was pale and cool, the sun barely cresting the horizon as Elena Rossi stood at the edge of the canal. The water, calm and shimmering with the gentle hues of dawn, whispered softly against the ancient stones beneath her feet. Venice was waking slowly, a city still cloaked in the residual silence of the Acqua Alta season, its streets drying and its secrets settling, at least for now. Elena's gaze drifted across the labyrinth of canals, the reflections of centuries of history dancing just beneath the surface. This city, with its beauty and its betrayals, had changed her irrevocably. She felt the weight of the submerged archive resting in her mind, a burden as much as a treasure. The documents she had uncovered, fragile and secretive, spoke of a Venice both magnificent and marred by shadows. It was a history etched in water and secrecy, a story that refused to be fully told or forgotten. Elena knew that some truths, like the tides themselves, could never be fully contained or controlled. Luca Bellini appeared quietly at her side, the familiar creak of the gondola oars breaking the morning stillness. His weathered face bore the marks of the city's sun and salt, and his eyes held a steadfast loyalty that had become a rare comfort in the treacherous months past. "The city breathes a little easier today," he said softly, his voice a balm against the lingering tension. "But the water never truly leaves Venice." Elena nodded, grateful for his presence. "Neither do its secrets," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult within. They pushed off from the bank, the gondola gliding silently through the mist that curled like ghostly fingers along the narrow canals. Each stroke of Luca's oar was a reminder that Venice was a living entity, its heart beating beneath the surface of the water and stone. As they moved, Elena's thoughts turned to Isabella Moretti, whose cold gaze had haunted the social gatherings and whispered intrigues throughout her investigation. Isabella stood on a balcony overlooking a quiet canal, her silhouette framed by the waning shadows of the past season's floods. There was something almost regal in her posture, yet beneath the elegance lay the tension of a woman torn between ambition and fear. Was she ally or adversary? The question lingered like a dark ripple across the waters they navigated. Back in her modest quarters, Elena carefully laid the last of the recovered manuscripts into a protective case, her fingers trembling slightly with the weight of responsibility. Each document was a testament to the resilience of truth and the fragility of memory. She thought of her great-grandfather, whose ties to Venice's aristocracy had first drawn her here, and the legacy she now carried forward. The distant ringing of church bells cut through the morning air, a clarion call signaling both an ending and a beginning. Elena understood that her role was no longer merely that of an archaeologist uncovering lost history, but of a guardian balancing the delicate line between revelation and preservation. To expose every secret would be to risk upheaval, to unsettle a city still recovering from centuries of betrayal and silence. Yet to conceal too much was to betray the pursuit of truth itself. Her solitude was profound, but it was also a source of strength. Venice had taught her that beneath its serene surface lay currents of danger and beauty intertwined, much like her own journey. She was no longer the cautious outsider. She was part of the city's ongoing story, a keeper of its echoes beneath the waves. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the drying streets and empty piazzas, Elena felt a quiet resolve settle within her. The Acqua Alta would come again, as it always did, bringing new floods and new mysteries. And when it did, she would be ready not just to uncover what lay beneath the water, but to face whatever shadows emerged with it. The city breathed around her, alive with history and promise. Elena Rossi stepped forward, embracing the uncertain future of Venice's endless dance with water and secrets, knowing some truths were meant to flow beneath the surface, forever out of reach yet never forgotten, and so, beneath the surface forever,